Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Unlimited. Today, we are talking about finding time to proactively plan, versus reactively plan. And that was something that came up after the last episode where there were still some things that we wanted to dig into around some examples about planning that actually relate to this. So it's unsurprising that when I put out a call of what do you struggle with when it comes to planning? The question was, well, how do I find time to do that? Especially when it is something new, when I'm trying to create a plan to start a new thing. How do I prioritize something new when I have so many current things happening in life that fitting something new in is completely overwhelming, and so it just doesn't happen. And this is very understandable. I mean, we live in a society that is constantly giving us more information, more things to do, to process. We are super busy people. Whether you are anti-hustle culture or not, that is the culture that we live in. It is designed to keep us busy, whether it is physically busy, mentally busy, emotionally busy. We are inundated with stuff. So this is a great topic. We should definitely talk about it. So what we're going to be looking at is why you struggle to plan ahead. And some of this may be obvious and some of it may be stuff you hadn't even thought about, but we're going to dig into that. Identifying your priorities, because sometimes we think something is a priority, but it's actually something different. And the priority that we think it is pulling us further away from our actual priority. It's very confusing. So how do you figure that out? The belief that you have to earn it. I know I've talked about this before, but we definitely want to talk about it, especially in relation to this. Fitting in exercise and housework, those are two that come up frequently, so let's talk about them. And they also, of course, relate to some of the examples that will help us understand some of the dynamics of this. So yay, exercise and housework. Where and how to say no. Yes, we are talking about boundaries. There are a lot of people talking about saying no, saying yes, when to say no, when to say yes. So we're going to explore just a little bit about what that looks like and conceptualizing it, especially in relation to planning. And then, of course, accountability and creating habits, because that is how we start to create time. But of course, in this, we're talking about starting something new. So how do you create a habit around something new? And this isn't necessarily creating new habits, because what we're talking about is planning for something new. And we often have new things. So how do you create a habit around planning and fitting in new things? So we're going to talk about that too. Now, as always, everything that we dig into, there's some basic conceptual things. There's stuff that may or may not apply. Everyone is different. Everyone is unique. And the root of what I do, while, we're doing podcast stuff and I'm giving you concepts, if you want to dig into this for you and what exactly is going on in your life such that you can create the space for these new things, create a plan that actually fits you, follow through on it or reflect on it, and develop an awareness and an alignment with how you do what you do, that's what I'm here for. That's what my coaching is about. And I invite you to grab a spot on my calendar. Just schedule a call. I do a free initial session. So there is no pitching. There is no whatever, unless that's something you want to chat about, is how do we go further. But if you just need some clarity, you want to get on a call and understand how do I get moving, let's talk about that. Just grab a spot on my calendar. There's a link in the show notes, and there's also a link on my website, and I would love to speak with you. And without further ado, let's get started. Hey there, I'm Valerie Friedlander, Certified Life Business Alignment Coach, and this is Unlimited. This podcast bridges the individual and the societal, scientific and spiritual, positive and negative, nerdy and no, there's just a lot of nerdy. Come on board and let's unlock a life that's as badass as you are. Let's talk about why we struggle to plan for what we want, why we struggle to fit in something new, to prioritize the things that are actually important to us. This is not a catch-all, but there are some core ones that I often come across when I'm working with clients. So I figured let's chat about those. And of course, as I look at these, I always love to hear from you. So if you have ones that you're like, this was the thing for any of these, please reach out and let me know. I love to hear from you, whether it is to give me some insights in what you've discovered, or if you have questions for me, please feel free to let me know what those are. So some of the main things that I have found when it comes to planning for what we want, planning for something new, a change or whatever. One is that we just have too many fires to put out. There's just too much going on. And whether it is stuff that we could change because it's in our own life and we have power over it, or what is frequently the case right now, there's just a lot going on in the world. There's a lot that is emotionally draining. And the fact of the matter is that time is not the same for everyone. You'll hear a lot of, oh, there's 24 hours in a day. Everybody has the same 24 hours. That is not true. And I really want to be clear about that. Not only because it's important when you're talking to somebody else about what they have going on, but it's also important for yourself to give yourself grace and to know that what is true right now, as far as your time and the amount of time that you have tangibly, will change. It doesn't stay the same all the time. Now, there may be certain things that you do that take more energy than other things, and then building skill sets around them, finding ways to make them more interesting can make them less exhausting, can make them take less time. I mean, how many of you, probably all of you, have had something that you were just learning, just starting out, take way longer than after you've been doing it for a year, 5 years, whatever. So knowing that what you start off with is not going to stay the same. And that goes for planning as much as executing the plan. So sometimes people think about that as like, well, okay, I'm going to plan extra time for the activity that I'm going to be doing. But hey, guess what? Planning is an activity too. So especially depending on what you're planning, if there's newness such that you're a little nervous about it, or even that you're really excited about it, but you're uncertain, if there's overwhelm, any of those things, if it's something that stretches your comfort zone, that pushes your buttons, whatever it is, that can mean that it takes more time to do. And especially once we dig into some of the other things that can create a challenge around planning, those things can factor into being tired, in not having as much time, or having planning take more time as well. So it's really important to remember that time is not just how many seconds you can count, how many minutes or hours or in a day. That's not what this is. Time is energy, and it's really important to remember that and support yourself, give yourself grace. You sit down to plan, it takes longer than you expect. Know that. It won't always take that long, and it may take longer depending on what it is that you're engaging, planning, and what kind of resistance that you run into. So, all right, enough on that, but you get the point. One of the other things is that you may have learned to affirm that you can't have what you want. In the past, you may have had enough things where you had a hope on something, where you were excited about something, you were excited about an outcome, you were going to have something you planned, and then it fell through. It didn't work out the way you thought it would. Something didn't work, and you were disappointed. And the fear of that disappointment can be really painful. It can really be hard. It takes space to work through disappointments. One of the reasons in the last episode I talk about giving yourself a buffer to a plan so that you can process that disappointment. Well, if you've had enough disappointments, if you got your heart set on something, on a particular outcome, if you worked really hard, maybe you hated what you were doing, and then you got to the end of what you were doing and you didn't get what you thought you were going to work hard to get, then that would be especially disappointing. So when that's happened enough times, especially if there's childhood stuff around that, shoes dropping, it can be really hard to sit down and plan anything because of that fear that you won't get what you want, that the planning will be for naught, that it won't matter. There's a whole saying around hope for the best, plan for the worst. Well, there's an issue with that too, is because, where your focus is on planning for something to not go well. So we're kind of exacerbating that fear that something bad is going to happen, and we're focused on the potential bad thing. Again, that makes sense because that's your brain trying to protect you from the danger. The danger is the bad thing happening, right? So It means, though, that the focus is still on the outcome, whether you're hoping for the best, whether you're planning for the best, planning for the worst, whatever it is, the focus is on the outcome. Now, I'm not saying don't have an awareness of what you would like to happen, but this is the reason why in the last episode I talk about when you're building a plan, you want to build it in the process. You want to build an alignment between the outcome and the process so that what you are doing, you're not spending a whole lot of time pushing yourself, fighting yourself to do something that you don't actually enjoy, that's not connected to you in some way in that process, such that you get to the end and have an extreme drop in disappointment. Well, I did all that. I wasted time. Oh my gosh, that's a big one. We should probably talk about that more. Wasting time. You can't waste time. You can only use time. But if you've really attached yourself to an outcome, it can feel like you wasted time. So baking in alignment into the process is really key so that you have a flexibility around that outcome, so that the outcome is information. The outcome helps you assess and engage and shift and make another plan, because all of this isn't the end. We get really into like the nitty-gritty of that particular plan, but that plan is part of a bigger plan that we may not be focused on right now, and that's your life. It's also the world and like how what you do impacts outside of you. And it's not just that one plan. So knowing that there's a bigger picture and the plan is like, I almost like to think of it as an experiment instead of a plan, because for me, at least, that word shift allows for a container for the activity, but it's an awareness that it's not a fixed thing. It's not about like, okay, this is going to be it. This is the be all end all. So giving yourself that kind of bigger picture of the plan being part of a progress in life or engagement in life. And maybe you take a detour, but that's okay because there can be other opportunities in that detour. So just rethinking about it can make it feel less intimidating. Another thing you might have affirmed is that you won't follow through versus that you need to troubleshoot it. For example, if you're like, oh, I set a plan, I was going to do this thing, and then I didn't do it. Oh, I never do the thing I say I'm going to do, so therefore why even make a plan because I won't do it, right? So there's that. I had a client, I've referenced this one before, about exercise. Here we are on the exercise. Planning to exercise 3 days a week. And she was like, okay, we're going to do this, and wasn't doing it. And that's actually one of the reasons why she came to me, is because she's like, I want to do this, but I'm not doing it. Why am I not doing it? And the root of that wasn't about creating time to do it. It wasn't even about having a better plan for doing it. It was actually recognizing that there was a root to the resistance to follow through on the plan, because she was kind of like, well, I don't follow through. And it becomes part of the identity, right? No. You are not that, right? Like, I don't follow through. Ooh, the I am statements. No, it is that there is a resistance that we haven't identified. So that troubleshooting part, well, what is creating this resistance? And in this case, we got to, through a series of questionings, and this is one of the reasons why I invite you onto a call, is because it's hard for me to ask the right questions when I'm talking to myself. But in this case, asking questions around her relationship to the exercise, what kind of exercise she enjoyed doing, how she felt in her body. And as we explored that, we got around to, well, she doesn't really like her body, and that's why she wants to exercise, is because she wants to feel stronger and more capable in her body. And she doesn't feel that right now. And she's really mad at her body for not being strong and capable. And so they had a contentious relationship. And most people don't want to spend time with someone they don't like, right? I mean, that's not exactly something you're like, oh, let me go spend time with someone who I get really angry at. And so that was the root of the resistance to the plan that she had made to exercise. It wasn't that she doesn't follow through. It was that the plan didn't fit the relationship that she had with her body. So we needed a different plan that was more appropriate for that body relationship. And little hint here, everything is relationships. Whether it is a relationship with your body, a relationship with a spouse, a relationship with your kids, a relationship with your work. I mean, everything is relationships. So understanding the relationship that you have to the thing that you're planning, or the things that play into what the plan is around, can help you build a plan that actually fits, that affirms that you can follow through on a plan. Now, the other one I will address here is that belief that we are often fed that we have to earn what we want, that you don't deserve happiness, you don't deserve joy, you don't deserve to be the person that has success until you've earned it. Which leads us, of course, to not defining what success is, what good is. We just kind of like chase this idea that, well, if I do enough, then I'll be enough and then I'll have enough. And that is very rooted in the economy that we exist in. It's this constant need to produce and to consume. And we have to step out of that when we're talking about planning, especially when it's baking in something that we want. Because if you believe you don't deserve it, that you haven't earned what you want, you will build a strategy that doesn't align with the feeling that you want to have, the reason you say you want the thing. Well, once I have this, then I'll be this person. You are already that person. You can already be that person. If you are focused on achieving something in order to have the feeling that you think that you'll have when you get there, then that plan that you build is going to be one where you are going to affirm that you can't have what you want, because wherever you go, there you are. So you get there, and even if you get the thing that you want, it will be short-lived, and you will then need to chase the next thing. So being able to know that you are worthy, that you are valuable, all of those things that I talk about extensively in other episodes is really important, so that you are building something that matches what you want and not just planning to have it later. Not to say that you're going to have everything now. Sometimes it is planning for having something, but if you're baking in the person that you want to be, the way you want to show up to life in that process, that alignment will support you better than if you're having to earn your worthiness, which again is a huge message that we get in the society. So it is understandable if it is a challenge, and if you struggle with it, there's nothing wrong with you. And I really want to emphasize here that while I say this, when you are constantly bombarded with messaging contrary to that, it is very hard to stay in a space where you know that you are valuable, that you are already worthy, and you already matter, and you are already an amazing person. So just know that if you struggle with that, again, there's nothing wrong with you. It is very normal in this society. Okay, so now next is, okay, how do we create that time? And I want to highlight here that I'm saying create that time versus find that time. I feel like finding that time, like the idea of finding time, means that it plays into that idea that there's same 24 hours in a day. You just got to find the time to do it. And it really isn't about that. It's about creating the time, making the space for what's important to you. And so that's where we have to start, is what is important to you? How do you prioritize doing something? Well, you need to know what your priorities are. And not just like, why would you do this thing to achieve this other thing? It's, again, going back to, how do you want to show up? And then what supports you in showing up like that? What are your values? Looking at the 6 areas of influence: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, environmental. When it comes to even creating the space for creating a plan, what is important about those characteristics, those factors? When you're actually creating the plan, what is important about those within this? And, going back to the exercise component, like what's important about that physical relationship, the mental dynamics, the emotional dynamics. We often don't make space for something new also because it feels like it's threatening a value that we're currently honoring. We're so busy. We have so many things going on. We do things because we believe that they're honoring values, whether we're consciously believing that or because we've automatically moved into that. And most things that we do is subconscious anyway. So we're autopiloting honoring values in ways that we might not even be aware of, for values that we might not even be aware of. Maybe they're not actually values we want to honor, but somehow we've internalized them, like earning, accomplishing. Anyway, so noticing, what are those values? What is influencing us? For example, a value of family, while at the same time feeling good about honoring another value, like time with friends. If those feel like they're in conflict, it's going to create a sense of guilt. Oh, guess what? Remember that thing we talked about where time is energy? If you're experiencing guilt, that drains energy. Hey. If you check out the episode, Stop Reacting and Start Responding, there's more that kind of digs into the guilt component and the values component. But knowing what those are is really key to being able to engaging something new, making time for something new so that you know what values are at play so that you can ensure that you are consciously engaging the value when you're creating space for something new so that it's not just a sense of threatening the values that you're currently honoring, but how this new thing is also honoring the values that you have. When we wrap in the idea of deserving, going back to that, like, well, I have to earn it. I don't deserve it yet. What are the conditions you believe that you have to have in order to have earned it? What has to be true that will say, okay, you've earned calm. You've earned peace. You've earned fun, whatever it is. You've earned time with friends. You've earned a moment to yourself. You've earned space to build your business, whatever it is. How true is that condition? Bringing that forward, because most of the time we don't realize we have set conditions to having things, but hey, if it has to be earned, then there are conditions. What conditions that you believe have to have been met to have the experience of life that you are looking for? Who says? Who says that? And then looking at, well, what's the benefit to having that thing now? I often look at, for a parent, like having time to yourself, having time out with friends. The benefit to having it now is that I'm more centered and that I can engage my kids better. The benefit to having time for personal development means that I have more awareness of myself and I can show up better, right? All of those things. What is the benefit? Again, it's essentially tying in the value. What value are you honoring in the process that's important to you? And then seeking a creative solution. Once you actually know the dynamics that are at play, then you can seek a creative solution. One of the examples that came up recently with a client was the conflicting values of personal development and dealing with housework. It's like, I have to do housework. Yes, doing the housework honors my value of accomplishment and family, but it's so tedious and it's just constant. And so in some ways, my value of accomplishment actually gets threatened, and it's definitely threatening my value of personal development because it's just, it does nothing for me in that respect. I'm caring for other people. I'm caring for my space. But what it came down to also was, hey, this is a lot of unseen labor. So it's not just about accomplishment. Oh, I got this room done. But like when it's constant labor that's not being acknowledged, whether it's from within you or from without you, that unseen labor actually threatens the sense of accomplishment instead of honoring it. And it takes time from the personal development. So she's like, oh, well, no wonder this is draining and exhausting and it just takes longer than I want it to. And of course, then it takes time away from planning to incorporate new things. So acknowledging what the dynamics of those values are to be able to go, oh, I could actually enjoy what I'm doing more if I'm listening to a personal development podcast. And if I talk to the people around me about complimenting, hey, words of affirmation, if we're talking about love languages, complimenting what I accomplished. Maybe there's like a little flag you can put up. I mean, just get creative. It's okay to ask for what you need. Oftentimes we struggle to ask for what we need because we assume that other people should already know. And that goes back to all this assumption stuff that we talked about earlier. When you ask for what you need. Even if, all right, yeah, they should already know, you give them an opportunity to learn, because if they're not doing it, then they don't already know. And assuming that they should doesn't help them learn. It just actually triggers a yucky feeling that makes them not want to learn, because it creates this shutdown of like, well, I'm doing things wrong, I'm not good enough. And then that creates that survival mode, avoid or fight back. And that's not a very fun dynamic. So asking for what you need gives people that opportunity to learn what it is that you need when you're asking in a way that is not attacking. Now, that doesn't guarantee that you will get what you need, but it creates the space for that to happen. Related to that is saying no. Now, I mentioned a lot of people talk about saying no, but it is important when you're looking at those values, when you're looking at the things that you're doing, especially if as you look at your values and you go, oh, I'm actually honoring things in a way that doesn't really fit the way I want to be and what I want my life to look like, it is important to say no. So some of the questions that I would encourage you to ask when you are looking at saying no, look at what's on your plate, look at all the things that you're doing, look at your values, and consider the following. What have you got going on where saying yes is saying no to what you've identified as important to you, such as the space to make plans? What's something that is actually threatening a value even while it's honoring a value? Or maybe it's threatening a value that is an internalized value and not a chosen value. What did you say yes to primarily out of fear of a consequence instead of because it is meaningful to you? What is something that you're doing because of what people will think? Again, that can be honoring a value, but maybe it is threatening other values. And then pick something to say no to. At least one thing, even just to practice, especially if you're not used to saying no. Now, I do want to highlight, there may be things where you want to say no, but you can't say no yet for whatever reason. It's just like choices. Sometimes you want to make a certain choice, like leaving your job, but you can't do that yet because it just doesn't make sense for your needs as a family, as an individual, whatever it is. So what can you do to work toward the ability to say no? Even if you can't say no yet, once you identify something that you would like to say no to. Maybe it's delegating it. Maybe it is finding resources. Maybe it is working on your ability to set healthy boundaries. So it could be internal, could be external, who knows? Also, if you're not used to saying no, it can feel very uncomfortable at first and again, take more energy, which again takes more time. So giving yourself this space and acknowledgement that this is normal, there's nothing wrong with you. And especially if the people around you have come to expect that you usually say yes, if those are safe people, you can talk to them about it and say, hey, I'm working on this. Would you be willing to support me? Or what can we do to work together so that you can help me say no? It's that accountability. And that brings us to, of course, the accountability and encouragement, having people who will help you hold space for what you need. So if you struggle to plan, if this is a new process for you, sometimes having a co-working space where that is the intention. You could hire someone like myself to help you gain clarity. Or maybe you have friends who are really skilled at doing that. Then reach out and have someone who's willing to just listen and let you process or journal about it or whatever. It's really important when you're working to create time that you're communicating. This can come up a lot of like, well, I can only fit it into the cracks. I can only fit what I need into the cracks. Making a plan to plan is important. So, asking yourself, what do you need to be the person that you want to be, to show up the way that you want to show up? And knowing what it takes to plan for the time that you need. So when we're talking about prioritizing, you do need space to assess what are priorities. So everything that I just talked about, taking time to look at what are your values, what's important to you, how are these engaging? It can feel like a lot to do. And so it can also create resistance to sitting down and creating a plan for something that you want. It is part of what you can build in. So what time do you need to check in and create a plan or create an experiment, as I mentioned, I like to say. So what do you need for that? What would support you? And even if you do it and it's like, oh, well, that wasn't enough time. Okay, that doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you need to assess what can you do? What do you need to say no to? What conversation do you need to have to create that space for yourself. Maybe there's a commitment. One of the reasons people will hire someone like me as a coach to help them is partly because of my skills in being able to hold that space and help you see yourself more clearly and make choices that are more in alignment and dig in deeper to understand the resistance. But it is also because making a commitment to someone else helps them allow themselves the time to do this kind of work. So having that kind of commitment to another person where they're like, okay, I am going to show up and do this work, supports them in actually making the space to do it. So that's just one other thing that can be of benefit. But maybe it's just setting a time every day, like setting expectations, both for yourself and the people around you, like every day or every week. This is when I do this check-in. This is when I kind of plan things out. A lot of times people will talk about like Sunday night, they sit down and plan their week out. Maybe that works for you. Maybe it's something where you do it on a daily basis, or maybe it's a little bit more flexible. It depends on what you need to support you and create that container for deciding what needs to be prioritized, deciding what you want to actually do, start something new. Why do you want to start that something new? What's important to you about that? I have a whole episode that talks about motivation, so you can go listen to that and see if that provides any insights. All of the links to the episodes that I've referenced will be in the show notes, so if you want to binge listen and check those out, awesome. They'll all be right there. And if you want support to dig into this and see what's going on personally for you and help create that space to make that plan and then move forward with whatever that informs you about so that you can do the next plan. That's what I'm here for. I would love to chat with you. I hope that this episode has been beneficial. I'd love for you to reach out and tell me what your takeaway was from today. And if there's anything else that you'd like me to explore related to it, I always am happy to get a DM or an email from you, my lovely listener. And with that, I will talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. I so appreciate you being here. If you got something out of today's episode, please share it. Leave me a review, take a screenshot, and post it on social with a shout out to me. Send it to a friend or, all of the above. Want to hang out more? Join me on Instagram. Or better yet, get on my mailing list to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And remember, your possibilities are as unlimited as you are. Allow yourself to shine, my friend. The world needs your light. See you next time.